Hello students and welcome back. This is a continuation of our talk on cannabis plant nutrition. Again, I'm Sage Frenetovich, the instructor here in this HCC course. So we left off talking about nitrogen and its importance for vegetative growth for a cannabis plant. And now we're going to talk about some of the other nutrients that cannabis requires. Another major nutrient that all plants need and that you'll see on fertilizer labels is phosphorus. It's abbreviated with a P as nitrogen is abbreviated with an N. And phosphorus is incredibly important for root and flower formation. So this is something that we need more towards the end of a cannabis plant's growing cycle, but some is important at the beginning with root formation. Again, when you start your cannabis plants, if you're starting from seed, don't fertilize them when they're very young. As they get more of their true leaves, as opposed to the cotyledon seed leaves, you want to give them a little nitrogen as they get bigger, get taller. So not at the very beginning, but as they grow. Nitrogen is important. And many nitrogen fertilizers also have phosphorus and potassium in them as well. As your plants get closer to the flowering stage, that's when you want to ramp up the phosphorus, decrease the nitrogen. Solution concentrations increase sharply with the onset of flowering. So you'll want to increase your phosphorus as you go through flower. You'll see this listed as phosphorus or phosphates or monopotassium phosphate on a fertilizer label. Potassium has an odd atomic symbol. It's a K. So you might see NPK listed. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So potassium is important for leaves and flowers and moving sugars around the plant. And cannabis has similar potassium requirements as tomato. Cannabis has a very large requirement for potassium, so you want to look for that on your fertilizer labels throughout the growing cycle. But you'll want to increase the potassium as you get into flowering, into the later stages of your cannabis grow, and increase it as you go through flower. Important to note, do not use thiosulfates in a hydroponic media. This will not be beneficial for your plants. You want to look for potassium nitrate and other phosphates, or potassium mixed with other phosphates for your main source of potassium. Calcium is another requirement for plant growth, and tomatoes require calcium. With tomatoes, not to get too far off topic, but tomatoes can develop a blossom end rot if they don't have sufficient calcium. And that's when, if you're growing tomatoes, you see a little dark spot at the bottom of the tomato. That's blossom end rot. Calcium can be included in media as gypsum and lime. Needs to be supplemented in liquid feed. Calcium nitrate is a common fertilizer, supplying both nitrate and calcium. Calcium is used most in the vegetative stage along with nitrogen. And you can apply it in these formations. And I know some growers who will apply calcium as crushed up oyster shells in their gardens. Oyster shells and mussel shells are made of calcium carbonate, and there you can just crush it up and it can be absorbed by the plant. Magnesium is another important nutrient. Calcium and magnesium you're not going to see overtly on a fertilizer label, but you might see it listed as some of the minor ingredients. This is important for chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the pigment that collects sunlight for photosynthesis. It's inside a chloroplast, inside a plant cell. So magnesium is important there. Many soils have magnesium in them. So if you're growing in a compost or outside in soil, magnesium might not be a nutrient that you need to pay attention to. And I say that with a caveat. It's always a great idea to get a soil test to see what is in your soil and if you're deficient in anything. Soil tests can be done at home. There are kits that you can buy to test your soil, but I highly recommend using the UMass Extension program to test your soil. if you're doing that. So they can give you an analysis of what's in your soil, what types of fertilizer you're going to want. And the last time I heard, the UMass Extension could not give recommendations for cannabis growing, but if you say that you are growing tomatoes, they can give you recommendations that will apply to you. That may change as our laws are changing. So magnesium can be found in dolomite lime in medium and Epsom salts, magnesium nitrate, and it's, again, important throughout the cycle of the plant, but you don't need a ton of it. So it's one of those minor nutrients that plants will need. As is sulfur. This is an important essential nutrient. It's important for amino acids, and it should be in a ratio of 5:1 nitrogen sulfur. Sulfates are a main source of sulfur and found in micronutrients, ammonia, potassium sulfite, and gypsum. Elemental sulfur, just elemental, is not acceptable in media. So sulfur is one of those nutrients that's required in small amounts. Micronutrients, these are things that are really tiny amounts are needed for plant growth, but they are important nonetheless. Iron, manganese, zinc, copper, and nickel. These help the plant to develop healthy chlorophyll. They aid in chemical reactions that happen within the plant cell, and they help the plant to bounce back from stress. So these are things that you might see listed on a fertilizer, but you might also find fertilizers that are specifically micronutrient fertilizers for cannabis or tomatoes. So that's a good thing to look at. The Cannabis Grow Bible, a great textbook that we have for cannabis today, and a book I recommend for the Cannabis Education Center, can show you some pictures of deficiencies of these micronutrients, what it looks like. We'll also talk about that a little bit in plant pathology and diseases. So when you have a micronutrient deficiency, it can manifest as a visible symptom on your plant, and you can diagnose it that way. So with hydroponics, there's mixing of fertilizers with water and fertigation. Plants will need all these essential nutrients. Some fertilizers are incompatible and cannot be mixed together in concentrated forms. So you should take a look at your labels, and again, check out the Cannabis Grow Bible for some detailed information on that. Typically, though, you can find hydroponic fertilizers that are pre-mixed, and this is especially helpful. These come in sizes for the home grower and sizes for industrial commercial grow operations, where you can have Big Bloom is one name, that's Fox Farm brand fertilizer, and that's great for blooms, for flowering. You might see a picture of a tomato on the front. Flowering and fruiting is what that fertilizer is great for, and that would be for the end of the growth cycle. And then you might see others that are geared towards the vegetative stage. So you can take a look at those. They would be marketed just for those specific time periods of growth, and they'll have the proper mixes of nutrients and micronutrients that the plants need. So like I said, there's typically 2 blends there for hydroponic programs: grow formula, high in nitrate and nitrogen, and a flower formula that's lower in nitrogen, higher in the potassium and phosphorus. You can run these simultaneously sometimes, depending on the brand, at different rates. And you can also use these hydroponic fertilizers in a soil operation as well. They would require additional dilution, usually a 1:4 dilution. You can also see that sometimes on the label. So hydroponic fertilizers can be used for soil with additional dilution. So in summary, cannabis has different requirements in the vegetative and the flowering stage. The requirements mirror what's required for tomatoes. Nitrogen, really important for vegetative growth. We want our potassium and phosphorus, very important for flowering. Don't forget about the micronutrients. And as far as class goes, please see Moodle for some additional readings on this topic and assignments related to it. Again, email me with any questions you have. My email can be found on the Moodle page. And happy growing!